l'origine l'équipe scientifique du festival et le château de Fontainebleau, qui à l'époque était présidé par Jean-François Hébert, ont eu l'idée que la conférence inaugurale soit une conférence d'artistes. Et c'est évidemment quelque chose qui nous tient formidablement à cœur, de montrer que l'histoire de l'art est une discipline en prise non seulement avec le passé, mais aussi avec le présent, et que de toute façon, elle parle toujours depuis le présent, et que les artistes avec lesquels nous travaillons, avec les œuvres desquelles nous travaillons, ne sont pas forcément des artistes disparus, mais des artistes avec lesquels nous pouvons aussi dialoguer. Depuis l'origine de ces invitations, il y a eu des artistes qui ont en fait montré à quel point ils étaient aussi des historiennes ou des historiens de l'art, et c'est de façon très évidente le cas de Mario Garcia Torres. Je ne vais pas vous faire son parcours biographique, mais simplement dire qu'il a cette particularité d'en faire vraiment, c'est un grand artiste mexicain international qui fait en artiste de l'histoire de l'art et qui questionne les méthodes et les approches traditionnelles de l'histoire de l'art. Il va nous en parler, je crois, en partie aujourd'hui. Et je veux remercier le château de Fontainebleau, à la fois sa présidente, mais aussi les équipes, et notamment Grégoire Bruno, le délégué général, d'avoir permis, les équipes de conservation aussi du musée, la régie, d'avoir permis que des œuvres de Mario Garcia Torres soient présentées dans le parcours permanent de visite. C'est la première fois qu'on intègre des œuvres des artistes contemporains dans le parcours de visite, et je pense que c'est une chose très intéressante, et que c'est intéressant de notre point de vue que ce soit un artiste historien de l'art qu'il le fasse. Vous le verrez, avec un rapport à l'histoire complexe et qui nous interroge. Il va dialoguer tout de suite avec Nicolas Tremblay, qui est un grand critique d'art international, commissaire d'exposition suisse, et qui a accompagné le travail de Mario Garcia Torres et qui va discuter avec lui, pour nous, à notre place, en lui adressant un certain nombre de questions. Bonne conférence. Bon festival à toutes et à tous.
How do you feel today, Mario?
I guess I feel okay. Lots of things to remember in my mind right now. Trying, at least.
Like what?
I don't know everything that I have to say to you. There's a lot of dates, images from my work. You know, it's been, some works are older than 20 years, and sometimes, even though I've spent a lot of time on them, now I forget the details.
In the last session, you sent me a little text saying, I'm not someone who thinks about his own past. And I thought that's really strange for someone who constantly think about the other past. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I guess that's something I started to realize lately, actually. It's not, I never thought of it. But now, after working for some years, you start getting invited to make larger shows with many works, and then you have to start thinking what you have done. And even though I like the past, now I realize maybe it doesn't even exist, you know. What is the past? I mean, it's a confluence of what you remember, what you wish. I don't know. And when I think about other people's past, it's still a construction. So when I think of my own past, I rather don't go there, actually. I'm not interested in keeping that.
But in this text called Confession, you go to your past. And you say something has changed. So, what has changed?
Well, you know, I think the work, it feels when you make an artwork, it feels like it's stable. But when you look at it after some years, or even when you actually start making it, you have ideas, you have a certain image of what the work will be. But already by the time you start producing it, it already starts changing. So I'm just thinking what I thought my work was. Suddenly, it fades away. It doesn't exist anymore. It's just potentially, it just reinvents itself every time you see it.
So, could you give an example? For example, something that was important, a work that was a key moment in your career?
Yeah, I could speak of a specific work of art that I made maybe 20 years ago. It started with a question that had to do with how long works last. I was intrigued by a question, by an artwork that I saw. It was by an American artist called Robert Barry. I was a student back then, and I realized that Robert Barry had sent some instructions to some other students in the late 60s. These students were in Halifax, in Canada. And the instructions he had sent said, gather the students should gather, agree on an idea, and keep it as a secret. And if the idea leaves the secrecy of the group, then the work will stop existing.
Could we see an image of this work?
That's an image I took myself with my camera. That is Terrell, Richard, and some other people I don't remember anymore. I mean, sometimes I remember, but not anymore. Not now. But this is some of the students that gathered to create The Secret. And 30 years later, I thought, oh, I need to know if that piece still exists. So I invited them to go back to Halifax. And this is us in one of the locations of the works that they've made. One of the moments that I think you were asking was the moment when it took me a long time to gather them and to make them come back. When I first read the instructions, I thought, oh, maybe there were 20 students. But then through research, I realized that there were 3 or 4 of them who had The Secret. When I finally gathered them and invited them to come to Halifax, that became my work. And the only thing I wanted to ask them at the end of the day was if the work still exists. But they thought, because I had made such an effort to bring them to Halifax, they thought maybe Mario wants to know what the secret was. So they gathered that one day before I arrived. And when I arrived, I said, well, does it exist? They said, yes, we think it exists because none of us remember what it was. But they said, but we can make one for you if you want. I said, no, this was even more interesting. And this is an example of how my work, my research became something else. I think.
You should sit back.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. So, these obsessions with secrets, mythology, or absence, why do you think it's so important?
I don't know if it's important. I think that when you have to transcend your reality, when you have to rethink who you are, you have to find places to go to try to challenge conventional thinking, I guess. And you go places, you go to those times. But at the end of the day, it just seems that everything is invented. And that's the success of it, I guess. When you manage to create a new reality of your own world.
In your mythology, there is another artist that is very important, is Alighiero Boetti. And you even went to Afghanistan to look for him. Why?
Well, I was very intrigued. I guess he was a good storyteller, Boetti. I was intrigued by the fact that he had created a hotel, such a faraway place in Afghanistan in the 1970s. And he was very smart about the way that he told the story, because the story only entailed 2 images that it seemed he might have taken. These 2 images were, and still are, in every book about Boetti. The story is always the same. At some point, Alighiero Boetti went to Afghanistan, met a waiter, and created a hotel with him. And I read this all the time, many times, and I was always intrigued and kind of suspectful about the fact that if this could happen. And he did something quite smart, I think, which is before he died, in his last interview, he said, oh, the hotel exploded in the Soviet invasion. And this statement just seemed very strange to me. So I've spent 8 years, 10 years, I don't know, looking for the hotel and spending time thinking about it. First, I created a narrative. I created a fiction, imagining myself looking for the hotel in Kabul, a place that was in war at the time. And then eventually, I started after 9/11, a lot of images of Afghanistan started to populate the world. So I started to look for the hotel through other people's images. And I managed to find the hotel. It hadn't exploded. I did a work with that. I presented that. And eventually, a curator invited me to go to Afghanistan and visit the one hotel. I felt I was very late to check in, but it was a good time.
Do you have an image of this hotel? It looks more like Switzerland, no, than Afghanistan. No. Is it the right image?
That is an image of when we found the hotel. After some months, we could manage to rent it. It was part of Documenta, the exhibition in Germany. And we said we could hold this. But we realized very soon enough, we realized that nobody in Afghanistan actually liked it or were interested in it. So we thought, how do we create a monument for Boeti, for this story, without really making it permanent? So we decided to rent the place. And we realized that it was a broken house, and we had to repair. We had to clean it, made some structural repairs, remade the garden, and took care of it because we thought that's the way that you say something is important for you. And then the snow came, and that's the picture.
You told me that you sent him letters, but he was dead.
Yeah. I wanted to transcend my reality. So I just thought, I still do it. And that fiction that I created for myself eventually became reality because I was in Kabul looking for the hotel.
What was the address? Where did you send those letters?
I just sent them to myself thinking that it will reach him.
That's a bit naive, no?
You have to twist your world, huh?
So what did you do in this hotel once you found it? Did it like solve your quest or your questions?
No. Actually, after spending years looking for it, there's a certain deception about it, which I thought was interesting. Because, again, what you're looking for it never exists. It's just an imagination. And there's something interesting about deception. Deception is about yourself. It's not about what you don't reach, but it's about what you imagine. So you start asking yourself, why did you do that? I guess.
How many projects did you produce with Boeti?
I've made many projects. Some years ago, I thought I would stop. And I kind of managed to stop. But then it feels like I cannot stop it. I recently made a new piece. I don't know. It's something out of my power, I guess.
What are you doing?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you better go back on the
Oh,
couch.
sorry.
You need to work. So, among this pantheon of mythological male artists, most of them are dead, but not all of them. And since we're in France, I wanted you to talk about this big French figure that is Buren. If you can explain me your obsession with Buren.
Well, you know, early on, when I was trying to become an artist, I started to reading his texts.
So, just, what were you before being an artist? What did you do? Do you remember? Where were you?
Just hanging out, doing nothing, trying to get out of my own city. And art seemed like a good way. But then I realized that most of the art around me were things that I was not interested in. So at some point I met some books of poetry of Buren. And then they had an impact in my thinking, but then I forgot about them. And years later, somebody told me that he had actually come to Mexico. And that intrigued me. I started to look for that story. I realized he had made a film very early on when he was young, before becoming an artist. He wanted to be a filmmaker. He made a film called Mexique. Terrible film, by the way. And later, I realized that he was somehow around. He had come to the Caribbean to make some works, and that intrigued me. I ended up there looking for the works in the Virgin Islands.
How did you find out?
Someone told me he had made a work in Mexico. They were wrong. It was not Mexico. It was a time when the internet was there, but there was very little information. And at some point, I realized that that was a true story and that had happened in the Virgin Islands. I got the information about the hotel. It was called the Grapetree Bay Hotel.
Again, a hotel story?
Oh, I guess, I don't know. Art is like hosting. There's a lot of relationships between hosting and doing works. Art is always a space to invite other people. I guess that happened in Kabul as well. I ended up having tea with people and telling them about Boeti. And the Virgin Islands was different. When I arrived, the hotel was destroyed. It had been destroyed for almost 20 years.
Do you have an image of this hotel? Thank you. Yeah, really destroyed.
I took that image. I don't remember the year, but 20 years had happened since it was destroyed by a hurricane. When I arrived, there was a new owner of the hotel who had bought the property. I was trying to rescue it. I didn't know what to do with it. I just went there and took pictures. By the time I had an image, a black and white image of this mural, I realized there was more murals from Buren in that hotel. we had to, they were covered with plants. We had to rescue them, almost like a anthropological, archaeological finding. And I took pictures and left. I went back home. I didn't know what to do about them. Until later, I realized that Buren had actually written a letter to his parents at the time when he was working there. And what I thought was interesting is that he said he was frustrated about his own work. And then I thought, this is interesting. In fact, frustration became his work and became the text that had influenced me a long time before. That's when I thought, oh, maybe this could be an artwork. Then I put them together, put the images together, and put some music to it. And the letter that Buren had written to his parents became the lyrics for my song. The images are now shown along music. I was interested in the fact that at the time, the hotels, to try to promote them, they will record bands, local bands, and publish records in order for people to hear the song and try to come to the hotel. And I thought, well, I will promote the hotel in a different way. So I made that. That became a work.
Did you use Buren for another project?
Never again.
Mm-hmm. Will you?
Not sure.
Do you have an image in mind to show of something?
Yeah.
What is it?
This image. I was very glad I could see this image because it was an image that had been described to me for a long time in the political scene in Caracas, Venezuela. But to get to this image, actually, it was actually Debord, Guy Debord, who had written about this fact, this story. He had rescued a story that had happened and that had been silenced in Caracas. That had to do with the fact that in 1962, the French government organized an exhibition of Impressionist paintings. It came to Mexico in 1962. The president opened the show. And a few months later, this show moved from Palacio de Bellas Artes in Mexico to the Museo de Arte in Caracas. And there, a group of dissidents thought they could get attention by stealing some works. So they stole 5 works. A Picasso, a Gris, a Cézanne, a few others. When I realized this, when I read this story from Guy Debord, I thought, this is interesting. So I went to Caracas, and I started looking into it. Nobody would talk about it. And at some point, I found the right people. And they all told me about this image. An image exists of a Cézanne with a baby in front of it. They thought that the baby would become a time signal. They had stolen the works, they had taken them, they had a team of people who would go into the museum. Each people grabbed a painting, put it in a car, and the car disappeared. The works were lost for 5 or 6 days. Eventually they realized that their message was not going through. The government had bought the whole paper edition of the paper, and they wanted to return the paintings. And they tried to do that, and going into a senator's house, trying to reach that, the police got the car and realized that the fireworks were there. This picture was taken while the paintings were disappeared. I made a work about it. But my work, the story I told it through one person. Her last name was Zambrano. And she was in charge of stealing the Cézanne, small bathers. And it happened to me. What caught my attention was that this person didn't have any relationship with art. And after her political activities, she got in jail. And at some point, the government said, "We will get you out of jail if we deport you." They put her in Russia at the time. Eventually, she went down to Europe, lived here for some years. And at that time, she started to look for the paintings and trying to understand who Cézanne was and what Bathurst was. So for a long time, all she wanted was to see the painting that she had stolen 15 years before. So when I realized this story, I figured out a way to find the painting. The painting had become part of what's his name? I don't know. Museum in Paris. And we managed to talk to the curators there, and they hung the piece for her to see it. And I invited her to come to Paris, and Nancy, one Monday morning, came into the Musée d'Orsay and looked at the painting. And that was my piece.
Why are you telling me this story?
I just think it's a nice French story.
Well, it seems you're a bit obsessed with paintings recently, no? Because you've been producing paintings, which is weird for someone who was just working with images and conceptual concepts from the past. So why suddenly you have the need or the wish to produce paintings? Do you want to be a classical artist, or why?
I guess it has to do with age. At some point in life, I guess. I don't know. It's not clear to me. But I have the feeling that at some point in your life, you start to put less attention to facts. These research things I was doing, they seem just total failures. And more I tried to put myself in a different space, in a space where unpredictability happens, where vulnerability happens. I want to be in an uncertain space. Hence, this shrink session. And it seems that painting could do that. Could take you to a place that you don't know, or at least to me. So I start to create paintings that I cannot control. And that's the start of it, I guess.
But do you know where do you want to go? Do you know where you want to inscribe your work In which history, for example, or?
Oh no. I don't want to describe the work in any history. That's why I stopped dating my work. Maybe, I don't know how long, several years. I stopped dating my work because when you look into other people's work, there's always that obsession of trying to make sense of things, trying to make sense of things in time, as if time was just a linear thing. And I think in my own process, ideas come from different years, different times, different moments, and they get collapsed, and they appear in different moments.
So, what if you want to do a retrospective and a chronological display?
I'm not interested in that.
Why not?
Because it doesn't explain anything. Why do you want to explain somebody's work? It's the objects that somebody puts out. They're just nucleus of meaning, potentially. They can rotate and circulate, go back and forth. I'm not interested even in owning them.
And do you know what made you realize that?
It's this insistence from museums trying to put the work together, trying to make me go back into my own work. It's a terrible feeling.
A terrible feeling.
Going back to your own time makes no sense to me.
Well, thank you, Mario. That's our time for today.
Thank you.